This is where you have all the elements to be embedded onto your forms. In order for you to create application in Visual Studio, you must design two things. The first part, you need to design the interface, and the second part, you need to design the code, or you need to write the code. Here is where we are going to start with writing your first Visual Basic application, which is known as Hello World. Let's imagine, or let's try to set up one application by having one button and also one text box. How to do that? Just locate to the toolbox. You can click and drag the elements that you wish to have onto your form. You can click and drag, or you can simply double click. For this purpose, I am going to use one button and one text box. I drag and drop the button just now, and for text box, I can just simply double click, and your text box will appear on your form. Bear in mind, in order for you to create your application, you have to design your interface, and also you have to design your codes. Alright, there you go. We have one button and one text box. If you look at the properties, whatever elements that you embed or whatever elements that you put onto your forms will have their default name. Okay, for example, we have button 1, we have form 1, and we have text box 1. There are two things that you need to take into account. The first one is what we call as the name of the element, the name of the thing that you put on your screen, and the second one, the label or the text on your element. For example, if let's say you want to rename the button into something else, you can locate the text properties under the properties window here. What you need to do is activate the elements that you want to work with. For example, my button 1, click once on your button and locate for the text property. By default, your button will show button 1 as its default name. You may change to click me and press enter. There you go. You have your button and you have successfully renamed the label on your button or the text on your button. But if you look at here, your button 1 will remain as its default system name as button 1. Can you name this button? Yes, you may rename this button so that you will have easy navigation, and also it will be easy for you to locate your elements that you put on your form. Try to rename your button into something specific. You may locate to name. Basically, name is the indicator used in your code to identify the object or the element that you have on your form. In the next session, when you click on the button or when you want to code for it, you have to use the name as what you put here. For example, let's put here as button and press enter. Now your button name has already changed to click button, and in the code section later on, you need to use click button to indicate the object in your form. Next, you may change the properties of your text box. By default, your text box will have its default name of text box 1. You may rename the indicator or the name that you are going to use in your code section later on. Probably I will just put here text box text. Alright, so for this purpose, what we are going to do is, in order for you to run your application, we want to have a test application where the application consists of one text box and one button, and whenever you click your button, it will display a message in your text box. Alright, how do we code your Visual Basic? Simply double click on your button. Remember, you need to code inside the element that you want to trigger. In a case where you want to trigger your form, you have to double click your form. In order for you to trigger some actions to be performed by clicking a button, then your codes must be written in that object or in the button. Alright, let's double click your button. There it goes. In the previous session, I have explained you on how we can create our first variable. Simply by having dim is used to declare a variable. In order for you to execute or trigger certain action through the clicking of a button, you need to write your codes inside the button. So, what do we do next? When you click your button, messages will appear on your text box. So what you need to do, just simply call your text box, which you have renamed to show text, the text box name. Don't forget to put dot. You are going to create text and put your message in bracket. You can see that when you create sentences or text element, the color will change from black to red color. So this is where your first application is created. When a user click on the button, here you have click button, and the action that you want to trigger is clicking. What will happen? The click will trigger the show text box to display hello world words. Okay, let's test our application. How to test your application? Alright, in your Visual Studio IDE, you can see this start button. This is where the debugging will happen. And in order for you to test your application, just simply click on the start button. Alright, there you go. You have your form with one text box and also one button. You can test by clicking your button and it appears hello world. So what we can conclude here, you are actually triggering something to happen in the text box by showing up text or sentences when a particular user clicks on the button. In order for you to stop your testing stage, you can just close your form, or you can click on the stop debugging button. You will be brought back to the code environment where you stopped just now. So here you can see that you have two sections. The first one is actually the design of your form. This is where you put all your elements. Alright, we are done with our first application of Hello World. Next, I am going to teach you on how you can create variables and how the variables can be displayed by using text box. Alright, by using the same interface, by using the same form, change the label of your button. Not click me, change to display name. Basically what will happen is that when you click on the button should display name in the text box. Alright, you can simply code your actions, or you can simply put your codes inside the button by double clicking the button. Alright, you can simply put your name, for example Amin Sahari, and when you start debugging and when you click on display name button, it will show Amin Sahari. Alright, now what if I want to put Amin Sahari inside a variable? So this is where we learned in the first section just now about variable. When you want to create variable, you need to start by using the dim keyword. Dim is a short form of dimension where it shows or simply tell your Visual Basic that you are creating a variable. Start with the word dim, and you need to come out with the variable name right after you have the dim keyword. Let's say dim first name. Whenever you create your variable, remember that your variable must be in one name only. You cannot have spaces in your variable name. So I put here dim first name. I am creating one variable of first name, and I need to state my variable is in what type, or simply my variable is in what format. I wish to have the format of my variable in text format. Then I need to declare my first name as string, where string represents text as a sequence of UTF-16 units. Alright, so this is where you have the string to be displayed or to be stored in your variable. And then I am creating another variable which is known as last name, and I declare the variable as string variable. There you go. You can actually see on your screen the variable names, first name and also last name, got green wiggly lines under them. It means that you have created your variables, but you have not stored anything yet into your variable. So how do we store values into variable? Simply by putting your variable name, first name, and you put equal sign. Don't forget, when you want to put any text value or string value into your variable, you must put them in double quote. There you go. When you have created your variable and when you have used your variable, there will be no green wiggly line under your variable name as what you saw just now. Next, I am going to declare my last name into the last name variable, where I put the string in double quote format. There you go. The wiggly lines disappear. And your Visual Basic now knows that you have one variable in first name and another variable in your last name. Alright? So simply when you want to get the variable to be shown in the text box, we need to call the variable, and you need to know where to locate your variable or where you want your variable to appear. And for our exercise, for this example, we are going to show the name by using the text box. Once again, which is show text, and simply call your variable name. You are telling Visual Basic to show first name here and last name here into show text box, which you can find in your design mode here. my first name and also my last name will be displayed in this text box. And when you go back to your code section, you can see that you are setting up string variable, two string variables with first name and last name, and you are calling the first name and last name to be displayed in the show text box. There you go. You can start debugging your application and see what happens. Alright, when I click the display name, it shows Amin Sahari. From this exercise, you can see that there is no space between Amin and Sahari. Alright, how do we correct this? Simply go back to your coding section, make sure that you stop your debugging first, or you cannot edit your code later on. Okay, so this is my first name and also last name. Whenever you call a variable, there will be no space, there will be no other interception of characters, interception of symbols into your text box. If let's say you want to have spaces, you are the one who need to put the text or the space to differentiate which one is your first name and which one is your last name. By doing that, simply add an empty double quote and you put the and sign after that. It means in order for you to concatenate, in order for you to combine text and variable, you must use the ampersand symbol, and same goes to text. To be combined with variable, you must repeat by using another ampersand symbol. This shows whenever you want to combine your variable and also your text, the combination must be followed with ampersand symbol. So I put here ampersand after first name, and I put one empty text here to represent a space, and I put another ampersand symbol before I call my last name. There you go. Start debugging and test your code. Alright, when I click display name, you can see that it is still not correct. Why? Because you have combined variable and text, but you have not give any space yet into the double quote. So how do you give space? Very easy, very simple. Just put a space bar. Alright, just press your space bar on your keyboard and ensure that you have created one small space here to differentiate your first name and also your last name. And simply click on the start debugging to test your application. When you click on the display name, there you go. You have your first name and also your last name to be combined together with a space in between. Alright. Another example of creating Visual Basic application by using variable, you have seen that you have created string variable where you play with text and you store the text into a string variable. Now, let's look at our last example on playing with numbers as variable. Alright, just create another text box. Locate your text box in your toolbox. Double click your text box. Now, we are going to put two numbers and add two numbers together. Alright, in order for you to put labels on your form, simply click on the toolbox and locate for label. You can see that you have label 1. So this is where you can change your label name to number 1, simply to indicate that the text box will be used for number 1. Alright, repeat the same step by locating your label, double click on your label and arrange nicely or design nicely your label on your form and rename it to number 2. From here, your user knows that alright, the first text box will be used for number 1 and the second text box will be used for number 2. Alright, remember that we are recycling our objects. Make sure that you rename your object so that your object will serve its purpose. Alright, for text box number 1, change the name to be used in your codes later on as number 1. Remember, when you are renaming the system name or the name that you are going to use in the code, you cannot have spaces and you cannot have two words to assign as your object name. So what you need to do, you have to put everything in one without having space. And for number 2, I can just click this, activate my object, locate the name, and change the design name to number 2. Alright? Go back to your button, rename your button as calculate. And change the label on your button as calculate as well. Alright, so basically this is a calculate button, and locate for text and change to calculate numbers. Alright, the text actually represents the label on your object, and the name represents the name that you are going to use in your code section later on. So from here, your user will understand that by clicking this button, the button will actually calculate the numbers that we are going to enter later on in number 1, text box number 1, and number 2 inside text box number 2. Alright, simply double click your button, and let's clear off this one first. In order for you to play with numbers, you have to declare integer variable. This is where you are going to start with the dim keyword, and I put here as num1 as my variable name, and I specify the type of the variable or the format of the variable. I want my variable to be in a format of integer. Alright, so this is where I have two numbers, which is num1 and num2 as integer. Now we have created two integer variables, and as what we did earlier, the variables contain green wiggly line under the variable name, which indicate that the variables are not used yet. In order to use the variable, simply call the variable name and put equal sign. So num1 is actually equal to whatever input that user enters in text box number 1. So how to do that? Simply put val to represent the value and put from where you want to retrieve or from where you want to get the value. We are actually getting the value from number 1 dot text. So from here, your Visual Basic will understand, I want to assign number 1 a value, and please get the value from number 1 text box, which means from text box number 1. And for number 2, simply repeat the same procedure. Put the val keyword so that your Visual Basic understands where you want to retrieve the value or where you want to get the value to be stored in your integer variable. And as what we have named it before, we put number 2 dot text. There you go. We have number 1 to store whatever values entered by user in text box number 1, and number 2 to store whatever values or number that user enter in text box number 2. Now, let's put one simple calculation where your application will add up these two numbers together. So, in order for your application to total up, to add up these numbers, simply put simple mathematical expressions by combining or by adding your num1 plus num2. Now, you already have the expression of num1 and num2, but there is no place to store the total or the addition of these two numbers. So how are you going to do that? Simply by creating your third integer variable, which is known as total. Dim total as integer. I simply tell my Visual Basic that I want to have number 1, I want to have number 2, and I want to have another variable which is known as total to store the values of addition from number 1 and number 2. As you can see, total is not used yet. Simply put total in front of the calculation of num1 and num2. Here it goes. Your Visual Basic will understand that you are actually putting up another integer variable where the variable name is total and the total contains a value of the addition of number 1 and number 2 that you have declared before. Now, you have declared 3 integer variables. You have declared 2 variables that require inputs from user, which you put in text box 1 and text box 2, and you have another integer variable known as total, where the total will store value or data related to the addition of these two numbers. Alright, now where do you want to display the numbers? The addition of the numbers. Where do you want to display the total? For this purpose, I would like to use another feature of Visual Basic, which is known as the message box. Let's try to display the total of num1 and num2 by using message box. Alright, in order to do that, simply call msg box and simply put your variable name and start debugging your application. When you press the calculate numbers, it shows 0. Why 0? Because your Visual Basic has not received any input from users which require users to enter number 1 and number 2. Alright, simply enter 2 numbers. Let's just put 4 and 5 here. When you press the calculate numbers, it will be automatically calculated and the numbers will be shown in a message box. Alright, how do you beautify your message box? Okay, as you can see now, you only have one figure or one number there, which is 9, and there is nothing else on your message box. To beautify your message box, you can go back to the code section and you can put text for beautifying your message box. Let's say I put in bracket the total of adding number 1 and number 2 is, I put 1 space so that I will have space between my text and also my variable. Put 1 space. Don't forget to close the double quote and don't forget to put ampersand to tell Visual Basic that you are actually combining text and variable in your message box. And there you go. You can start debugging one more time and see what are the changes made. So the total of adding number 1 and number 2 is 0 because there is no user input. Simply put another number, let's say 2 and 3, and when you press on the calculate number button, what you will get is the addition of 2 and 3 in a proper way. Alright? Okay, stop debugging your application, and now let's look at on how we can insert an icon into your message box. Alright, in order for you to add your icon, after you have put all the contents in your message box, simply put comma and locate for message box style. We have message box style dot abort retry ignore. We have message box style dot application model dot critical dot default button 1, default button 2, and so on. Locate for message box style dot information. Simply double click and that will be added into your message box. So when you start debugging, you can see that an icon of information icon will be displayed in your message box like this. There you go. You have one blue icon of information icon added onto your message box. There you go. So from this session, I hope that you have a brief understanding on the Visual Basic 2019 Community Edition platform, and at the same time you have been introduced on how to create your first application of Hello World. At the same time, you also have learned on how to create variables, especially integer variables and also string variables. Hope to see you again in our next session. Stay safe, take care, thank you, and have a good day.